On this week's episode of An Echo of Glory, there's no match to review, but we have a look at the international break. We talk to Dan Kilpatrick from the Evening Standard about his interview with Johan Lange, and we preview the West Ham game with the Athletic's Roshane Thomas. Welcome to another episode of An Echo of Glory. Joining me, Johnny Blaine, is Gary Diamond. Hello.
Morning.
Morning. And now, we were going to have... People have been asking me, what's happened to Jake Robson? It's been about 6 weeks since Jake Robson was on this show. I haven't fallen out with him. Jake the Flake, I'm now calling him. He pulled out yesterday morning, but this man stepped up. Jake Sanders, hello.
Hello.
I think you're like now...
Ollie Solskjaer.
What, super sub? See, that's harsh on him, calling him super sub.
Well, he came in the last minute and he saved the day. And,
But he wants to be a start. He wants to be a starter.
I don't want to be a starter.
Well, Jake Robson's gone right down the pecking order.
Got to know who he is.
Who?
Yeah.
He's
There's only one Jake.
He's been out for 6 weeks. You know, typical Spurs.
You're Jake one now.
It was supposed to be 3 weeks, but he's been out for 6. Very Spurs. He's back. He's back training on the grass.
Doing some ball work next week.
He's our very own Richarlison.
Well,
He'll come back and he'll have a good few shows.
He'll go off again.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're our Dom Solanke. Welcome.
I'll take that.
All right, we'll start with this. No men's game to review. Thank God we all had a restful weekend. The women did play, lost 3-0 against Man United. Always beat them. I don't think they've ever beaten them. I think they might have lost every game against them. I watched the first half. They
Drew last season, though.
I think it was the most shots they've ever had in a WSL
They
game.
played really well in the first half, but then conceded 2 goals in 5 minutes before half time, and that was the end of that. Why are you laughing?
Just wish it was always the way that a team would concede 2 goals and that would be the end of that.
No, but the key component was they came out and scored a third.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to get Gary's opinion on that because we haven't had it yet.
I think they did well to come out and score a third.
Buckle up. International roundup. One thing I saw last night is that Vicario is going to start for Italy in their game against Israel tonight, which they'll win that. Other things that happened, Johnson went 7-7. Someone sent me the link. I think it's a couple of people fell down on this. There's a brilliant ball over the top. Someone, I don't know who it was, took it down and slid it under the keeper, who I thought was Johnson. I was like, oh, that's a brilliant, what a touch, Brennan. It wasn't. Johnson was a bloke who stole the goal.
It was David Nugent-Defoe against Andorra-esque.
Yeah. But every goal's a goal, right? 7-7 for Johnson. If it wasn't Spurs, he'd have been all right, but he got a knock. He couldn't walk.
He'll be fine.
Yeah, I think he will be. Bellamy said it was
probably done us a favour that he's not playing.
He's done himself a Saka there, pretended to be injured.
He's suspended anyway.
Yeah, he can't play against, is it Montenegro they're playing tonight? He can't play in that, but he did come off injured at half-time. He couldn't, from about the 43rd minute, he couldn't run, but I think it's a knock. Other players, Dragusin scored in their big win against Cyprus. He also came off, but I think that was tactical. Came off with about 8 minutes to go. Porro started for Spain. Yep. Played well, just kept passing the ball to
that was
Yamal.
Good fun. Yeah, I saw a bit of that.
Just give it to him and you look good. But he did play well. Romero was suspended for Argentina's first game. He'll play Wednesday morning our time, 1 a.m. They're playing. Udogi hasn't yet played for Italy. Van der Ven played against Hungary. He looked good. Bentancur didn't get on. Kulusevski's played for Sweden. Mikey Moore, see that
Great goal.
Great goal.
I've seen it, no.
Scored for the under-19s against the Netherlands.
He's just too good for youth levels now. He just ran from 40 yards out and beat a few
players.
players.
I mean,
he just is. He just is.
He's still 2 years below that year group. So,
yeah.
No, I know, but like I just watched it and just thought like
it's not
that's
fair.
It's just way above that. You saw what he did when he played against League One team. Was it Peterborough or someone a few weeks ago? And he scored like a few and got a few assists. He's way above that level now.
Okay, well let's jump ahead quickly. Start him over Werner on Saturday.
I think this would be more of a suited game to start him.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be completely different. You know, you're going to need technically
Brighton
good players.
Brighton had a high
West Ham
line.
are not going to come out, especially away from home. Yeah. A player like Werner, you know.
Well, actually, it could be irrelevant because Son is probably.
It reminds me of a bit like when we used to have, even when Lucas Moura was really good. Moura in home games against low blocks never sort of worked, and Werner, Yeah, I would actually start him. I would actually start more.
You start Son, obviously, but if Son's not available.
Yeah, I would start more. I don't think this is at all the kind of game to have Werner trying to pick a West Ham defence.
And other internationals are... Basuma captained Marley. That was good to see because he's been in and out of that team. But he was captain. Maddison, not in the squad. Pape Sarr played... actually, I don't think he did come on yet for Senegal. They'll have got another game. And... Solanke came on and ran around.
Came on and set up the goal.
Did he set up the goal?
Yeah. Okay. Unintentionally, get Bellingham's goal.
Oh, yeah. Got a flick on that.
It's everything that's wrong with the
assists. Yeah, I'm not giving him that. Okay, so there's your international roundup. Some news from Alistair Gold last night, which I think Paul O'Keefe had mentioned already last week. Son and Richie training this week, which is good. Odebear might train. We're not going to see him even if he is training. No, he won't be back for West Ham.
Richarlison training or on his own?
Actual training. Because he's been on his own.
There's a chance for AZ Alkmaar then.
Well, you'd like to hope he'd be on the bench on Sunday.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
Good that Son didn't. Even him being injured is not good, but good that he didn't travel. He looks knackered anyway. When he comes back from international break, I always feel like it takes him 3 games to get back in it. And then there's another one.
So we've now got, I think, from this international break to the next one, we've got a midweek game every week.
Yeah.
Europa League, League Cup, Europa League, international break. So
yeah.
The last thing he needed was to be playing against God knows who for no reason.
Yeah. All right. Gary, you weren't on after we lost to Brighton. Maybe you knew something because you were going to come on. I think you said, I can't do it.
I had too much work, to be honest.
I think you knew. So I want to ask you about that game specifically, but also, like Ollie said, when he was last on, Jake came on and how we had this chat. The helicopter view. This is a good time to take stock and look where we are with no game. So start with Brighton and then take that into, because I know you're very positive and that's fine. But go on.
So, how do I start? I think the
that summarises the Brighton game, don't it? Really, don't know where to go with there.
No, I do. The difficulty we've got at the moment at Tottenham, thinking about the season and thinking about Brighton as well, is the reason it's hurting so much. The reason we're all as frustrated as we are, and I've said it before, is because it feels like we're so close to being really good. And that is the main cause, I think, at the moment of the angst and the pain that we're feeling. If we were resigned, and there are some Spurs fans, there's a segment of Spurs fans on Twitter that are saying, we're just rubbish. That's not the case. I think anybody who is objective about this and watching us is seeing a really potentially very good team. And that's where so much of the frustration is coming is, when you're that close, it just seems to hurt even more. If we were just rubbish, we'd all be a bit pathetic and we'd be like, we're just rubbish. We need a new manager. We need a rehaul of the squad and we're going to lose on Saturday. So it is what it is, right? And that would be your attitude. But that isn't the attitude of anybody, or certainly not of most people, because I think we can all really see that actually, aside from one half of football this season, the performances have been really, really good.
In the Premier League.
In the Premier League, yeah. I'm not counting Coventry, right? But in the Premier League, the performances have been really good. And the results haven't quite been there, and that hurts. And then if you think about the Brighton game, I don't think many teams will go down to the Amex this season and be 2-0 up at any point against Brighton, never mind at half-time, and be coming off at half-time and feeling slightly aggrieved that you went 3 or 4 up. Now, yeah, they had 1 or 2 chances first half. They're a good team. They're a very good team. I was actually really impressed with just how good they were on the ball. They're the only team this season to have played through us and played through our press a couple of times. And in the first half, there were a few moments I was sort of saying, that's good football. That's really good football from Brighton. And that's not in any way making an excuse for the result. But the point is, they're a very good team who I think a lot of people felt were a bit of a joke team after what happened at Chelsea. But I don't think many teams will go there and be 2 up. So you have to look at that and say, we went there, we were 2 up at half-time, we dominated them, we'd taken a team that had averaged 60% plus possession and reduced them to 30% or whatever it was in the first half. We dominated territory, possession, the chances, the XG, every single metric you can think of, we dominated in that first half.
And then what happened?
And that's the positive, right? That is where we are a really good team. Or close to being a really good team. Because where we're not quite a good team is... Romero walking off Vardy. Romero go and walkabouts at St James's twice, and then
Romero go and walkabouts every single goal we can see.
Romero go and walkabouts against Arsenal, right? And I said before, if Romero is the problem, then your problem's probably going to be all right. And I'm not picking on Romero here. I'm just thinking about why we haven't quite got the results we have. I think a lot of the players were at fault for the goals second half, but it was the attitude of the team. And I think the interesting thing about the Brighton performance is the reaction of the fans to Ange and of the reaction of Ange himself on the sidelines. And that was really the big talking point, was Ange stood there shaking his head and people saying, well, he just didn't know what to do. He can't coach at this level. People who have never coached a game of football in their lives telling that Ange can't coach at this level. It's kind of ridiculous. It's not about Ange not being able to coach at this level. It's not about him not knowing what to do, because one thing I do get from Ange is that he is good with in-game changes. I've felt that in a number of games since he's been here. But this did feel different. They came out and the attitude was wrong. The mentality was wrong. And I think Ange saw that. And I think he recognises on the sidelines, you can throw on subs, but if the attitude around the team, if the energy isn't there, the aggression isn't there, and they've just dropped, it doesn't really matter what you do.
I don't know, but you're bringing in players who can change that.
Yeah, but I do think as well, and this is something else I've been thinking about, is Romero was captain. I've advocated for Romero to be captain on the pitch. I've said we need a bit more of a leader than Son on the pitch. But it did get me to thinking. Romero didn't step up and show leadership qualities, particularly in that game. And so again, I'm not digging out Romero. What I am digging out is that the team as a collective didn't show leadership.
Yeah,
there was not one person.
Have we ever though?
But this is the
point.
Point.
I think since the Poch team. It's been since the Poch team.
The Poch team grew, but they weren't in the beginning of the Poch era.
Young.
But exactly, they were young. As is this team. This team is young.
So they should learn from it. What I said after the Brighton game is how you learn from
But this is it, and I think this was exactly Ange's point on the touchline. Is he can make changes, he can shake it up, he can bring players on, but the players at some point on the pitch have to learn to step up and take responsibility.
So you're actually saying, in a way, it's better, and I'm not being flippant.
No.
This has happened.
Yeah, in a very Machiavellian kind of a way, right, where the ends justifies the means, and Ange is here for the project, okay? I think he's going to take them off that pitch and say, none of you, not one of you, got the rest of the team together, got the heads together, got the head screwed on, calmed it down, understood what needs to happen, whether that was retaining the ball for a couple of minutes, just knocking it about, slowing the pace down, having a tactical injury and coming over to the touchlines a la Arteta, right? Like, whatever it is.
That could also come from him. Say to the nearest player to you, go down for 2 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, but they should
know. But they should know. They should know, and they have to mature.
I do that on a
right. But you're right. You'd think that players would know this, but I do kind of see where Andrew's coming from with this, right? He's there, and it is a lesson that I think... Do you know what? I suspect if we're 2 up at half-time again this season, I suspect we don't blow that lead. And I suspect if we're 2 up again at any point under Ange, we don't blow that lead. So it's painful and it hurts, but it feeds into the whole view of the season so far, which is we are close to being a bloody good team. And that's the frustration right now.
Jake? I think
I've let off all my steam last week.
I think, like me, you agree probably with most of that. I disagree that he was like, well, if you've blown it, I can't change it. He could have at least been. It might not have worked bringing Basuma on or whatever, but as a fan, you look at it and go, he could probably change that.
He basically the way I took it was he's basically like sort of we didn't deserve to get anything, so I'm not going to try and get anything. That's the way he said. We didn't deserve.
He kind of gave.
We didn't play well enough to get anything, so I'm not gonna try. And the whole point is you bring 2 or 3 players on, and they bring a bit of inspiration and a bit of fresh legs and energy, and the others feed off it. That's what subs do. You're trying to turn a game and try something different, not just we didn't really deserve it, so I'm just not gonna we got all these guys on the bench, and I'm just going to wait until it's
too late.
The game was over.
But there are so many things he could have done. I thought Udogie should have come off and Spence should have come on. Udogie was struggling, whether it was injury, whether it was mentality.
I think he's not having Spence. He's not having Spence.
Well, whatever.
He's absolutely not.
Whatever it was, okay. There were many options that he had, and you can say he's going, we didn't deserve it, so I didn't change it. Again, I go back to what I said just before. I do think he's looking at that, saying, where are my leaders on the pitch? And I think that will be the conversations that he's having when they come back. None of you were leaders. None of you put your hands up. None of you showed a bit of maturity. We've got World Cup winners out there, got seasoned internationals out there, and not one of you put your hand up and took a bit of responsibility.
When you look around who should... I think Kulu, he's captain in Sweden now. I feel like
I don't think he might be that young of a team. I honestly don't think that was that young of a team. I really don't.
But it is in terms of where they are in this program, in this project, and in the cycle. That they're still young in terms of playing together, and they haven't been in that situation very often as a team. So, you can talk about age, fine. Maybe they're not that young of a team in terms of age, but in terms of maturity as a team, they are still an immature team.
But like you said, we've got World Cup winners out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how much. This might be unpopular. I really don't know what winning a World Cup and winning 7 games at a World Cup 18 months ago does to you when you're 2
It's a good point.
Seriously though, what does it do?
Because you're a winner. Okay, you're a massive...
Roy Keane never won a World Cup. He never played at a major tournament.
He did, didn't he?
Or maybe he did play at
a World
Cup. Oh yeah, right. He played at one World Cup.
Oh no, hang on, didn't he go home?
But what does that kind of thing? What does Kulu captain in Sweden or Son captain?
It's responsibility.
What does it do though when you're in that position?
It's responsibility.
But what does it do? Seriously,
people look to you.
I watch Arsenal, right, and I look at players like Saliba, who's not very experienced, Declan Rice, who, okay, he's 23 years old and he's got much more game management and he's much more streetwise.
Odegaard's the guy that wears the armband, but I wouldn't say necessarily he's the biggest leader. They've got a load of them.
I agree, but that's what frustrates you when people say, "Oh, he's won a World Cup and he's done this and he's done that." The only real leader we've had in the last 5 years was Højbjerg. That is the only real leader we had in the last 5 years.
I can't.
And Kane.
And Kane. Højbjerg not necessarily the best player, but I do think as a marshal. Yeah,
I don't want to get into individual players, but I agree with your point, right? That and it's kind of the point that I was saying earlier about I'd advocated for Romero to be on the pitch captain, but it's kind of irrelevant if you haven't got a team of captains, and that's what Alex Ferguson always used to say, right? Is it wouldn't really matter who was the captain on the day. He had 11 captains on the pitch, and you could have looked at that United team. You could have thrown the armband to the worst player, Phil Neville, and said he could be captain because he steps up and takes responsibility. Where's Brown? Would step up and take responsibility.
O'Shea,
right?
all of them were.
All of them. That was Nicky Butt. Yeah. Not the best players, right? But that was the point of that winning United team. That's the point you're making about this Arsenal team. You look at Gabriel, you look at Saliba, Saka, Rice.
Ben White with his silly little tricks. Yeah, they're all up to that.
And that's the point. And that's where we need to go. That's where the team needs to mature, and that's where character needs to come through. And I think that's what Ange will be learning about in that 2-0 defeat to Brighton.
But it's not just about him learning. They've all got to learn.
That's the point. Yeah. He'll be looking at that. And now it's up to him to help bring that out of them. Okay, I have no doubt, say what you like about Arteta, I have no doubt that he has helped those Arsenal players become bastards.
100%.
He has helped them become bastards.
Even that, even I hate to go on. Look at this Calafiori guy. He looks like he's absolute bag of tricks every week. He's only been in the team for 2 weeks.
Yeah. But, you look at, again, I'll go back to Alex Ferguson. These players were not born like this. Alex Ferguson made them the bastards that they were. Yeah, right? He made them a horrible, filthy team to play against.
Bit worried about our censorship. We got knocked off Spotify for swearing.
That's why I'm trying to use the word, a slightly toned down word. Right? I'm trying to use a slightly toned down word. But, that's the point. And I think that's what Ange needs to look at next is, I'll tell you something that resonates with me. And I didn't particularly like Mourinho. And I didn't like the documentary. But there was one scene in that documentary that I loved. I really, really loved. And I think you probably already know which one it is. It's half-time against City. And he wasn't bothered about tactics or anything like that. All he did was look at them players and went, you can be sure that they know you're booked. You're booked. You're booked. Who of you knows which one of them is booked?
Yeah.
And it cut, right? But then the next thing, I think it was Harry Winks, right, goes past Zinchenko, who was booked, drew the foul. Zinchenko gets sent off, and we win the game. Brilliant. And that's where Ange now needs to go to help his team develop that mentality. I love that scene in that documentary because I'm all about that housery, right? Bleep housery, you're welcome.
Good algorithm saver.
I'm all about that bleep housery, right? Because you need that. And when you're 2-0 up away from home against a team, they're going to come at you. So you've got to be a little bit filthy and a little bit dirty, and you've got to reside.
Yeah, we weren't game smart in that.
I don't think that we need so much more housery. I think it's more leaders, but being streetwise.
Yes.
Tottenham have never been streetwise enough, ever.
Correct.
Like the stuff that like City get away with, and the Rodri fouls and stuff like that. And there was the Newcastle game, wasn't it, where Maddison had already been booked, and then whoever played, was it Jolinson, played the ball through and he couldn't foul him, and you just feel like City players wouldn't get into those positions.
Yeah, you think about Gallagher.
Smart enough.
You think about Gallagher last season, made the most amount of fouls in the Premier League and picked up the least bookings. So it's like that's the sort of street smarts that we need, right?
And those kind of attributes are so crucial in games like that. It could have taken one instance, one foul to slow the game down, completely stem the flow. You know, us to get back into the game.
Do you think that's also Ange learning, God, this is the Premier League, this is the stuff I need to do?
I think it's everything. I think it's a bit of everything, right? But you know, it hurts like hell when it happens. But I do think we're going to look back on this game as a seminal moment in the development of the maturity of the team. And I think Ange will recognise now that perhaps what he may have thought was you say, you know, you do that on a Sunday morning. Yes, so like
I played five-a-side last week, and the game kept going. We were 2 up, then 1 up, 2 up, and every time they scored and we were 1 up, you tried to slow it down a bit, stay down for a bit, you know, pass it back to the keeper, take the sting out.
I said this last week.
That's in five-a-side
football. I said this
football.
last week. I've played at the basis level of football, but when you were 2 up and you felt the wave coming against you,
and
turned
that's
to your
without
leaders.
a crowd.
Yeah.
But that's the point I'm saying. So maybe Ange thought that it was inherent or innate in the players. Maybe he's recognised, okay, this is an element of the psyche that is missing. So this needs working on, right? And in that regard, it could be that this 2-0 defeat, which hurts like hell right now, or certainly did then and still does, will become a seminal moment. And maybe we do become a bit more of a bastard team to play against. And we should be. And I'd love to see it. If we could add that street smarts and that hardness to our game to go with the beauty and the finesse, then we go from being potentially a very good team to being a serious team.
But I don't even think, last thing on that, I don't even think it needs to come from the manager. Individuals should take responsibility in that moment. What can I do to disrupt the game for the next 10 minutes? What can I do? Go down, fake an injury, I don't know, make a silly foul, win a free kick, something. Do something to disrupt that game. You do not have to be told that as a manager. And that could have been the difference.
You say that. These players are so manufactured these days, right? They're so manufactured.
Grown men, though.
And I go back to the point. Alex Ferguson made his players that way. Arteta is making his players that way. Klopp made his players that way because they were like it as well, with the old inhalers and God knows what else they were doing, right?
Allegedly.
You know, all these managers that go on to win things, they make their players these ways.
But we've got one of the biggest pantomime villains in the Premier League in Maddison, and I want to see more of that from him.
Yeah.
You know, Maddison is like, you know, apart from some, probably played more games in the Premier League than anyone else for us, probably, in the whole squad. Maybe Davis aside. I want to see a bit more of that from Maddison.
Yeah.
He's got that stuff, you know, and when he was playing well last season, he seemed like he had every single trick in the book. And when it gets a little bit tough, as much as I absolutely love Maddison and rate him so highly, I want to see a little bit more that from him.
You'd imagine that's what's being said this week. Right. Did you read a really good article by Dan Kilpatrick? He sat down with Johan Lange.
Yep.
You read it?
Yeah, cool.
Should we talk to Dan?
Let's do that.
Right, let's talk to Dan. Delighted to be joined by Dan Kilpatrick, Chief Football Writer for the Evening Standard. Dan, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good, thank you. Look, no weekend of Spurs, so it was a nice, relaxing one. But we're going to pick up on your exclusive with Johan Lange recently. I've read that, and for me, it looks like the painful rebuild that Poch talked about, that fans have talked about. So is that where we're going? But also, is it also fans are going to have to be patient? Lange's had a window and a half to get this sorted. We're going to ride it out and be a little bit patient.
Yeah, I mean, to your first point, I think this is a rebuild, but one thing Lange made clear to me in the interview is that the club is trying this delicate, difficult balance of building a team that they want to win now. And obviously, everyone knows Postecoglou's been very forthright about wanting to win now, you know, saying I always win something in my second season after the Arsenal game, and saying back in April as well that he expected to be in a title challenge this year. So that's kind of where he is, with also building this team that's going to be great in, you know, 3, 4, 5 years time. And that's obvious in the 4 teenagers in the squad at the moment, the 2 more coming in 2025. Vuskovic and Yang, is it?
Yeah.
So, look, clearly this is a project, but I think what they're trying to do that's perhaps slightly different from other projects which are clearly building for the future is they're trying to build a team that's going to be competitive in the here and now as well. And Lange made that clear. And as for patience, I mean, yeah, look, I've been saying this for a while. I totally get why Spurs fans are perhaps impatient because it has been far too long since the club won silverware. It really has. But I also think rebuilds are difficult. They always are, and they are always painful. That was, the right language I think that Pochettino used all those years ago. And I think there does have to be a degree of understanding that when a manager like Postecoglou comes in with a plan to not just rip up the football and start again, but kind of change the culture as well, which he alluded to, I think, after the Brighton game, the kind of mentality that does take time. So, while I really hope he's right and Spurs can win things this year and be in a title challenge and all the rest of it, I also think there needs to be a degree of understanding from supporters that he's building something that he wants to be sustainable, and that's going to take perhaps longer than they want.
Dan, it's an interesting time because this is all set against the backdrop of FFP, PSR, and so on. And you mentioned earlier what Spurs are trying to do different is build for now as well as the future. But doesn't it feel like this is what every club should be doing? Like every club, we're in a market where we're sort of competing against everybody else doing the same things. So what is it, do you think, that Lange, Ange, Levy are doing different to set Tottenham apart?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess first of all, everyone knows that under Enick and Daniel Levy, Spurs are not going to spend beyond their means. They've got a way of doing things. Many people are unhappy with it and disagree with it, but until they get this minority investment that Levy's been very open about looking for from elsewhere, they're not going to change the business model. So they have to, they have to go about things in a certain way, and that's the way they will go about things. So I guess that to answer your question directly, the difference with Man City and even say Arsenal and perhaps Manchester United is that Spurs have to take a slightly longer term view. They can't be constantly thinking under this business model. How can we immediately improve the first 11, which is a difficult thing to do for a club at Spurs level, by signing 50 million, 60 million players every single window. That they're just not going to do that as much as I think people would like them to. So I kind of agree with you. Like every club, should be doing what Spurs are doing, building for now and building for the future. I guess again, the difference with say Arsenal is that Arsenal have been through that period with Arteta where they were kind of looking ahead. They had their painful period where they finished 8th twice in a row. They got through that while kind of gradually adding to the squad, and now they've got to a position where they've got that baseline of quality and experience and depth, and they're kind of able just to stick sort of big players, big signings on top of that. I don't feel like Spurs are there yet. You still sometimes look at their bench. You look at perhaps someone like Timo Werner, bless him, or Ben Davies kind of starting games, and you think they wouldn't be starting for Arsenal or City or Liverpool. And I guess that is still kind of where the difference is.
Another thing that I picked up on, I think everybody's picked up on, is this more data-driven approach. The likes of Brentford and that team that beat
Brighton.
us, Brighton, forget about them. Teams are adopting this, and I wonder what your thoughts are on the transfer of Odegaard, in the sense that it happened so quickly after Neto joined Chelsea, and we'd heard nothing about it. That seems to be a change. We're not hearing as many rumours coming out of the club about the players that we're going to sign. So with that Odegaard transfer, where Lange was clear to say to you, it's not just about the data. We watch players multiple times. We investigate, we dig, we speak to past coaches, team members, all of this. It feels like there's a hell of a lot of work gone into that. Now, was Odegaard in backup to Neto, do you think? Or was it always Odegaard?
The Neto thing is a little confusing because different people in different clubs say different things about that. I think Wolves basically. The indication from Wolves was that they had a bid from Spurs, and then the indication from Spurs was that he was never on the list, and that's one of the sort of many murky, or I don't know if never on the list is too strong, but certainly they didn't bid for him, and that they weren't interested in the summer. So, there are many kind of murky back and forths where the transfer window is concerned, and you have to just kind of work out the truth if you can. But I'm not sure on that one, to be honest. I think. The first thing I'll say on Odegaard is I like I think all the teenage signings are really exciting, and people, fans should rightly be really excited about, particularly Bergvall and Gray, who I just think looks so good. But I do wonder if Odegaard was the one where it was, Spurs needed to be a bit more ambitious and get, more of a ready-made player in that front line, just given kind of how disjointed I think the attack has felt for a lot of the time under Ange. I mean, the fact that Johnson seems to have gone up another level, perhaps will change my mind, and kind of make that signing look more understandable, because we won't be thinking of Johnson as a project player anymore in a few months if he keeps us up. We'll be thinking of him as one of the best goal scoring wingers in the Premier League. Yeah. But I did wonder, whether Odegaard was the one where they should have just been a bit more ambitious and kind of gone out and found a bit more of a Luis Diaz type figure. Who could slot in immediately and wasn't a project. But I think, look, Odegaard, I think, was someone they watched for a long time. Lange told me, I don't know if I used this in the interview, that was actually quite a long transfer to do. They were working on it while they were working on Solanke. Right. I think they wanted to get Solanke done, and then they turned to Odegaard. So I don't think it was connected to the Neto. It was more connected to the time it took to do Solanke. Then once that was done, they went and pulled the trigger on Odegaard. But they clearly looked at him for a while. They've been following him since he was in France. I think it was good news for Spurs, really, that he got thrust into the Burnley team at the start of last season and played a full season in the Premier League. And I think that, eventually convinced them that he was therefore ready to kind of step up and come to Tottenham.
But that in itself answers the question that I was asking, because I think a lot of the fans hit out, we've missed out on Neto and now we're panic signing Odegaard. And it's a little bit like, it just doesn't happen like that, does it? There's a lot more thought and a bigger process behind it all. But I think just with the timing of Neto and then Odegaard being announced, fans jumped on it. So it's important for them to know the work that does go in and from how early a player is identified.
Yeah, and I think Odegaard was such an interesting transfer, just in that no one picked up on it. And I think the first report came out, like half an hour before the deals were announced with the clubs. And that's almost unprecedented in the Premier League today. And I did ask Lange about that as well. And I don't think I used this in the interview, but he just said something like, I think it's kind of important to be discreet, and it doesn't help anyone if everyone knows your business, which is kind of fair enough, I think. And it's an interesting contrast, I think, to Paratici, his predecessor, who I think, let's face it, was kind of on the phone to half of the Italian media, kind of letting them know what was going on. And that's not how Lange works. He kind of does his work in the shadows. So that was an interesting transfer in that regard.
And that's just my last question on the Lange discussion, or the where the club's going. A lot of fans, it's not something I agree with, but a lot of fans are currently saying, data-driven just means cheaper. Find me Messi's numbers for £30 million. We signed Solanke for 55 to 60 million. That's something fans have got to get away from now. This is the direction the club are going. We are going to delve deep and try and find these nuggets like Odegaard, Gray, Bergvall.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel like anyone should have to defend the use of data. I think, for the first thing to say is that the club's been using it for years. There was that AVB interview quite recently where he said that he was basically overruled on Moutinho, I think, because Moutinho's data wasn't good enough, and he was kind of down the list of midfielders they wanted to sign, and that was the kind of first instance at Spurs I've heard of, eye test versus data being a point of conflict. And obviously Pleat brought that up recently in an interview with The Telegraph after he left, saying that Spurs didn't care about the eye test anymore. They only cared about data, which Lange pushed back on when I spoke to him as well. I think data's, it's been used by clubs for a long, long time, and I think Spurs have just got a little bit smarter with it. And I just think you have to, if you're not using data at the cutting edge, then you are going to be missing out on targets to other clubs. You look at, someone mentioned Brighton and Brentford there, but you look at some of the players they found, Brighton in particular, in kind of South America.
Yeah.
No one really had heard of these players, unless you were kind of in that world.
Yeah.
And so many of them have been brilliant, and I think everyone wants their clubs to be signing those kind of players. You look at what Spurs have done in finding kind of undervalued gems in the market, like Sarr and Udogie and others, and I think data will have played a part in that as well as I think in those cases kind of Paratashi's network. So you do need a bit of both. But I don't think anyone should have to defend data. It's clearly a huge part of football now, and a huge part of being a success and being ahead of the game in the transfer market.
Dan, in terms of on the pitch, what have you made of the start to the season? Obviously, there's been a lot of good, but a lot of not so good. And I think if we'd beaten Brighton 13 points from 7 games with some tough away games, wouldn't have been a terrible points tally. But 10 from 7 is our worst since 2 points from 8 games season, which is obviously not very good. Quite a few points off the top already. What have you sort of made of it?
It's been a really difficult one because, like, a half time against Brighton, as you said, like I would have been very optimistic, thinking, it's looking like it's clicking. It's looking like all the things that Ange has been talking about are kind of starting to come to fruition. And that second half was such a mood shift. It was such a kind of vibe kill, I think, for Spurs fans. It really, everything just kind of came shuddering to a halt, and you just suddenly, what Postecoglou said in his press conference, kind of evoked some memories of Conte slamming the players' mentalities. And what have I made of it? I think Spurs probably deserves a strong word. Spurs could easily have more points than they do on the board. I think everyone who's watched all the games would accept that. I think that they've been a little bit unlucky. They haven't probably got the bounce of the ball in some games where they could have scored more. But it does feel like they're going to be a kind of really entertaining team who are incredible to watch at times, but they still feel a little bit like an unserious team to me, and I think that is a bit of a concern. But I'll go back to what I said at the start, the first question. Really, I do think you need patience. I think I wrote a piece after the Brighton game, a column for the paper, sort of saying, I think what we've learned is it does take longer to change the culture than to change the football. I think Postecoglou's not all the way there, but gone quite a long way to changing the style. I think a lot of those non-negotiables that he talks about are kind of embedded now. You see Spurs playing his way most of the time and doing it pretty well, and kind of cutting through teams really impressively when they're at their best. But you also kind of see this soft centre still persisting. They still give up a lot of chances, too many chances, and they should as a top team. And I think these things are kind of partly about the football, but partly about sort of intangibles like the mentality, which I think will take longer to shift. And obviously we could have a whole show talking about where the mentality issue comes from.
I'll get you booked in, Dan. You can.
But I think that's kind of as much of his challenge now as sort of continuing to build the squad and continuing to improve the football.
Dan, something you also obviously work on Spurs a lot, and England is your second love, and you cover that on the back of a win against Finland and a defeat against Greece. I wanted to ask you, a bit of a confusing press conference from Lee Carsley last night. Is he in the frame? Is he out of the frame? Does he want it? Does he not want it? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I wasn't in Finland, actually. I didn't go on that trip. But yeah, I've read the quotes, and obviously I was watching ITV and I saw him kind of effectively rule himself out of the job. I thought in his interview with Gabriel Clark afterwards, where he said England deserve a world-class manager who's won trophies, and I'm still on the path to doing that. Then apparently he goes into the press conference 10 minutes later and says, "Oh no, I definitely didn't rule myself out, and I've got an open mind," and all the rest of it. I was in the press conference after the Greece game when he was kind of grilled on this as well. I've got to say he was very unconvincing and quite muddled, and it did make me wonder about his readiness for the job. there've been reporting between the two games that he doesn't want the job, citing Football Association sources. So, yeah, I think overall it's fair to conclude that he's probably in two minds about it, but quite reluctant to go on the record and say what he really wants to do. But it's not a great look. I think generally it's not great for the team to have a lot of uncertainty, and it's just not a great look for the FA and England to have a manager who is kind of apparently confused about what's going to happen in November. For the record, I mean, I kind of quite like Carsley. I just quite like that he's willing to try things. We were all saying during the Southgate era, let's use these games to try things. I know the Greece game was a bit of a disaster, but presumably he's not going to do that again, and he'll have learned a lesson from it. And I sort of see the benefit of someone coming through the FA system, but equally it would be really weird if the FA was trying to persuade someone who doesn't want the job, who's arguably not really qualified for the job, to take it. That isn't what they should be doing. So if he wants it, then there's a conversation to be had. If he doesn't want it, then let's go and find another candidate who does.
Do you have a preference? Talk of Tuchel.
Well, I mean, look, I think if Carsley wants the job, I'm not sure I would say he's my preference. But I think I really think there are benefits to coaches kind of coming through the system and growing with the players, and that kind of gives you an advantage of international football. You know the players inside out. You don't have as much time to work with them, but you've in many cases worked with them since they were teenagers, and I genuinely think that's a strong tick in Carsley's box.
Spain had that with De La Fuente.
Yeah, and Argentina had that with Scaloni. He was their under-20 coach as well, and obviously England kind of had that with Southgate. So I do think it's not to be kind of sniffed at, that knowledge and of the players and the system. I don't know. I haven't thought too much about it. I'm not remotely inspired by Potter and Howe, to be honest. And I know they're the two often mentioned England candidates. I would have loved
Eddie Howe. I think it'd be fantastic.
Really, I don't.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a game of opinions.
Yeah.
Well, I almost don't have a huge judgment on his football, but I haven't been hugely impressed with the way he's kind of dealt with the sensitivities of working for Saudi Arabia, and the England job is like a job where it's not just about the football, is it? As we know, you kind of basically have to be a politician, and Carsley's not suggested he'll be great at that this week, and I'm not sure Howe would be great at that either. I would have loved Poch. I think he was a big enough kind of bastard to do it. Shame that he's presumably got the nod that he wasn't in contention and took the USA job.
And to bringing it back to Spurs, before we go on to the weekend, good to see Solanke in the squad. He just got a few minutes against Greece. How far away do you think Maddison is? Possibly needs another run of games like he's had to get close. I know it's a position we're pretty full. We saw that against Greece. He played them all in one hit. But is he knocking on the door?
Well, he's got to be knocking the door because he's been playing so well. But, I mean, it's almost like in the Greece game, all the talk was about how you get Foden, Palmer and Bellingham in the same team. Then Grealish scores again against Finland and he's back in that conversation. It's almost like really Carsley probably doesn't want another name in that conversation, just kind of making his job even more difficult. And I don't know. I really, I think Maddison's on the verge, on the cusp. He obviously is. He's very close. But I kind of wonder whether he's slightly missed the boat of sort of being an England regular. I mean, he's a lot older than obviously all those guys. With the exception of Grealish, he's a lot older than obviously Foden, Bellingham, and Palmer. He was kind of always in and out under Southgate, and he's never really kind of really established himself in the squad. So I don't think this is necessarily the last we've seen of him in England shirt, but you kind of wonder whether he's just going to be one of those unfortunate players who was in a really well stocked position and just didn't really ever get a proper chance. Like if it comes back to the coach as well, doesn't it? Like if Ange had been managing England and playing attacking number 8s, he'd have had a lot more game time, but that was never what Southgate was going to do.
No.
And going on to Saturday, big game, big London derby. Ange's only had, I think, 7 chances, but he's not yet beaten Arsenal, West Ham or Chelsea, the teams we want to beat every single season. How do you see Saturday going?
Is that right? I didn't realise that. There's my preview. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Name drop Echo of Glory.
I haven't paid a huge amount of attention to West Ham this season. I normally, sort of as the season goes on, get a bit more across the other clubs in London. I've been doing basically Arsenal and Spurs at the start, but I know it's been a pretty rocky start. I mean, I don't feel like Ange's under pressure. I think that's too strong a word, but I think after the Brighton game, that there is obviously always scrutiny on him, but it doesn't feel like a game that he can lose and kind of without there being quite a lot of noise, I imagine. So yeah, there's a degree of kind of pressure on it. Yeah, I mean, look, I like to think Spurs are going to have enough, and I like to think there'll be a response to the Brighton game. I think the Arsenal game was similar in that it was a bit of a flat performance, and then Spurs went into the international break, and the response was obviously really good. They've kind of similar setback, and just had another sort of 2 weeks to stew on it to think, how to put things right. So, yeah, I think he'll be expecting a sort of big performance.
Prediction from you before I let you go.
I'll go 3-1 Spurs.
We'll take that.
Of course, I'll take that.
Yeah, I'll take that. All right, yeah, cheers. I'm looking forward to it now. I wasn't. But, Dan, go on. Go.
Sorry, one last prediction. Ange, will he succeed?
What is success?
I mean,
but I mean, like you say, he's under pressure at the minute. It probably is. There'll be a lot of noise if we lose. We've got to have patience. Do you think he will get us to where he wants to go?
Yeah. I mean, I've been really sort of, obviously I try and be objective and all the rest of it, but I've been kind of really encouraged by Ange from the start. I really like his rhetoric. I really like how ambitious he is. I think it's exactly what the club needs, and for me, that's the way you change the culture I talked about earlier. You set really high standards and you challenge people to meet them, and if they don't, you keep changing things until people are meeting those standards. And I think he's set about things the right way. I like his football. I think that is the big question mark. Whether that approach sort of can be successful in this incredibly competitive league. But yeah, I think he'll win something with Spurs. It'd be great if it was the Europa League, the seasonal, or a domestic cup. I don't think Spurs are going to win the league title. But they're building something exciting, and to finish where I started, I think a degree of kind of patience and enjoy the ride. Really, it's not dissimilar to me to when Spurs were sort of coming up under Pochettino. It's enjoyable football. It's not perfect, but there's a lot to get behind. There's a lot of exciting young players, and it's a sort of fun experience.
I think so. I think that's where I'm at now. I've been a bit vocal, but I've climbed down from it. I'm on the journey. I'm on the Ange train. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully your prediction for the weekend comes to fruition, and we'll speak to you soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers, Dan.
Good chat with Dan. Covered a lot.
Could have spoken to him for a lot longer.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned we're going to win a trophy under not Poch, Ange.
No, so do I, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm starting to lean towards we might just win the Europa League. It's
I've
so
got news.
winnable. You've got
By the
news?
way, on that, I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
I don't know if I should say it, because I don't want to kibosh it. I've booked my flights to Bilbao.
I knew you were going to say that. And I was going to say
I've booked my
that
flights.
is a cardinal sin.
No, I've booked my flights. Like 150 quid. If I lose the 150 quid, I lose it. But at least if we get there, I've got my flights sorted.
I'll find
direct flight. Let me tell you something, right?
Yeah.
I'm going out the day before.
Yeah.
Land at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Home the day after. With the lunchtime flight. I mean, the flight times were amazing. It was too good to pass up, and I'm convinced that we get there.
I can't do that. I didn't book the Champions League final until the night of Ajax.
No, that I didn't.
I just feel like it's so. To be fair, there's a
good
chance we could obviously get to the final, but I just don't like tempting fate.
No. Like that's it.
But I completely get it.
I'll tell you why I did it. Because because I had a ticket for the Champions League final. I very nearly couldn't get to the Champions League final. And that just, I mean, okay, but imagine we'd have won and I had a ticket and couldn't have got there. I mean, thankfully they put on a private chartered flight, which for Spurs fans.
I mean, I flew to France and drove down.
I will get there.
I mean, I would have got there, but this way, like, I can relax, I can chill, right? If we don't get there, it's 150 quid. Like, it's not the end of the world, but like, if
I'll come with you for a couple of days in Bilbao if we don't get there. If you want, lovely city.
Yeah, fine.
Go to the final.
I'm slightly worried that I don't have enough loyalty points. I mean,
I don't think
I'm not, because I'm working on every Europa League game. I'm not buying those tickets.
I've lost all my points.
Yeah,
that's where work.
It is what it is. Listen, if we get to a final and win it, I'll watch it home with my son. I'll be delighted. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Anyway, I agree with Dan. We're going to win something, and I'll be there.
Just quickly, did we mention this the other week? Europa League or FA Cup? Did we mention that on the show?
What would I prefer?
Yeah.
Can I have both? Europa League.
Oh, yeah,
Really?
me 100% Europa League all day long. All day long.
Gets you into the Champions League.
FA Cup at Wembley.
Your knees going all trembly. Yeah, I mean,
I'm not as bothered about the Champions League thing.
I am.
Is that why the Europa League then? Because of the prizes?
Yeah, the actual, the
I
FA
feel like a
Cup's
European trophy is still.
I think
bigger.
the Europa League is the Conference League. I wasn't fussed about, but the Europa League is a genuinely recognised and appreciated trophy in Europe. Right?
If we won the Europa League, would you be like, oh, we're in the Champions League as well?
No. I wouldn't care about the Champions.
No.
Like, the Champions League is a consequence. I don't want to win the Europa League because it gets us in the Champions League. Similarly, like, if the FA Cup brought the reward of us being in the Champions League, I'd still want to win the Europa League. Just because,
okay, that's fair.
Just because I think I just think the FA Cup is pretty devalued these days. But I also, Tottenham in Europe lifting a European trophy.
Yeah.
Like, I just think...
listen to the Mickey Hassett episode last week.
All you need to do is see the teams that have won the Europa League in the last decade. Most of them have won their leagues.
This is why I'm the sad nerd that I am. I think you had this book too. Glory Nights.
Mm.
I used to go to bed every single night reading Glory Nights, which was a history of Tottenham in Europe. Bring that back.
I went earlier this year. We went to the night with Graham Roberts,
Ricky and
Ozzy.
Tony Potts.
Well, Ricky joined because he wasn't in the team, but like listening to those boys, telling their memories of 1984 and Anderlecht and all of that was, and the other thing is, people might say, small club mentality. The reality of it is, the one area where actually we are ahead of that lot is in Europe. We've got 3 European trophies. They've got 1. Let's go and win another one. Make it 4. Let's start putting some daylight between us. Let's do that.
You take the small wins, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Let's put some daylight between us. But the FA Cup is... I'd love to win it.
Let's win both.
Well,
that's what I said to you.
Exactly.
Am I allowed both?
Exactly. Let's win both.
Do you agree with what this method now? I did bring up the point of data possibly means cheaper, and fans have said that on social media. Not just in social media, some of my mates have said it too. Not sure I buy that, because we've seen it with Brighton. They've got some players. So if you can find the right player, they're out there.
But it's always the way, isn't it? Like, would I rather Ndombele for 65 million and 200k a week because he's Ndombele and meant to be the next biggest thing, or some unknown Bergvall for 10 million who I've never heard of, who goes on to be absolutely brilliant? It's an absolute no-brainer. Yeah. Like, money doesn't always equate, but the idea that we're not spending the money because, we're looking for these data and these bargains is also incorrect, because the data showed Dom Solanke was the striker for us, and we went and spent the money to get him.
Yep.
So it goes hand in hand. If the data is there, great. I guess what it does do is, if you're going to go and spend 60, 70, 80 million, whatever it is, the data really needs to be there on every single metric. Whereas, with a younger player like a Bergvall for 10 million, you can take a little bit more of a punt if some of the metrics aren't quite there. But fundamentally, if you're looking for a certain player and the data is all there and the background checks are all there, I don't doubt that we'd go and spend the money that we have available. I'm not suggesting we'd ever spend 100 million. I don't think we will at this point until we get investment. But I think if everything is backing it up, we'll go and spend that money.
Talking of investment, Amanda Staveley was at the NFL.
She's a big NFL fan.
Okay. Is it?
I don't know.
That rumour is more. I don't know.
It's not going away, is it?
It's not going away.
And she does seem to be showing her face quite a bit around the stadium. Look, I mean, until anything happens, this is the big question about Levy in, Levy out. It's so binary. like you can't possibly answer that question until you know who's in. Right, like Levy in, okay, Levy out. Okay, great. Who's in? Mike Ashley. Oh no, thanks.
Who I saw in a curry house on Wednesday night.
Oh really?
In Hampstead.
What was he having? Everything.
I don't know. He was dipping his naan into something, but yeah, he was in there.
So is he replacing Levy then?
No, but you understand the point? Like Levy in, Levy out is a completely binary question, right? If you're going, Levy out, and Mike Ashley's the man coming in, you'll be like, maybe I'll have Levy, right? But then if you're like, Levy out, but you've got, I don't know, some Arab oil state coming in and they're going to spend loads of money, then you're like, yeah, all right, well, have some of that, So it's a binary question. So with Staveley, it's impossible to really know because she isn't the money person. She's just going to be some sort of a conduit between the club and investment coming in, which again, I don't really understand because, I mean, isn't that what they're able to do by themselves? I don't really understand these things, but I think if there's investment coming in, it can't be a bad thing.
Should we talk about a football match? We've got one coming up, and as I said to Dan, I know he's only been here a season and whatever, just under a third. That's terrible maths. Whatever, just over a season, and he's not beaten.
No, that's right. A season and a third,
is it?
Nearly.
Oh, yeah. Can't remember how many games.
Season and a quarter.
There you go. Season and a quarter.
He's not beaten any of our rivals.
He's not beaten West Ham, Arsenal, or Chelsea yet, and there's probably nothing to it. It's just that's the stat. But it's about time, right? And starting on Saturday, hopefully.
West Ham last season at home was a joke.
We battered them for the first.
We had that period, didn't we? Villa and West Ham, where
we went ahead and lost.
Both of those games were a joke, but West Ham in particular.
Were they back to back?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the West Ham game was. We should have killed them off, but the goals were ludicrous, weren't they? Didn't we have a? Was it a horrible mistake?
A clearance that bounced off and just bounced to Bowen.
They hit the post. Did he hit the post and he tapped in the rebound?
No.
One of them was like an Adogi back pass, weren't it?
Yeah, which James Ward-Prowse, I think, intercepted and stuck it into an empty
net.
No,
they hit. Something happened when they hit the post and they just followed up and tapped it in.
Yeah, as I remember it, it was a clearance from Van der Ven.
That might have been Villa.
It was a clearance from Van der Ven that literally just bounced off one of our players and straight into the path of whoever scored their first goal.
I don't know if this is a sign, but as I mentioned, West Ham must have been bitten by something. I don't know what that would mean, but something's happened here.
West Ham always by us.
No, you were saying
you said before the game the stats weren't that bad.
We've lost 4 out of the last 15.
Feels more than that.
Is that bad? I think we've had a lot of draws, so it's probably 6 wins in 15. Which is
I'll tell you what feels bad is because we always just believe that we should beat West Ham, and with respect, we should beat. As massive as they are, we should always beat them. They are massive.
Gary don't like West Ham.
I don't like West Ham.
You're not even from East London.
You are? Yeah, come on. Tell us you're growing up. Did you have West Ham in your ear?
Yeah, I'm a West Ham is a bigger rivalry than Chelsea for me. As in,
I think it is for me.
I'd always rather beat Chelsea more just because they're a lot better, and there's a really good chance we can beat them. But I'd always take great pleasure in beating West Ham.
Did you have more West Ham mates?
Yeah. It was all obviously a lot of Arsenal, but a lot of West Ham kits everywhere at soccer summer schools and stuff. West Ham really bother me a lot. Really bother me a lot.
Me as well, and I'm not
big time. And yeah,
my hatred of West Ham just comes from their hatred of us. I'm like, I could honestly, West Ham to me are absolutely nothing, but they hate us so much. I just want to make sure we beat them because I know how much it hurts them.
They're one of those ones where you beat them, but then it's not like the feeling is not as good as when we beat Arsenal and Chelsea. I'll get on with my day on Saturday, and fine, I'll be happy.
The point. They're nothing.
We beat Arsenal and Chelsea. You feed off it for a good few days.
Yeah, listen, it's their big game.
Exactly,
but listen,
they're absolutely nothing.
But they're a good team. I think they've started.
They got unpopular.
Slowly.
They got better front three than us.
Yeah, you've said this a few times.
They do.
I think Ollie said it as well.
But Bowen, Paqueta and Kudus is top class.
Paqueta's not the front three though, is he?
But all right, the attacking
trio. I think it's. I don't think there's much in it. Our centre forward is way better than the centre forward. They haven't got.
Bowen's been linked with all the top teams. Kudus has, and Paqueta's been linked with West Ham, with Man City. They're all brilliant.
I know that we can't sign everybody, but you do look at players like Kudus and you think, where were we? There are other players in the Premier League.
He's unbelievable.
When we're picking from that level of player,
a
player like Kudus, I guess we had Son and at the time and whatever.
You say Kudus, I look more like at Bowen, and if we'd have signed him, people would have gone mad. But actually,
are you signing a player from Hull?
Yeah, exactly. And like Andy Robertson at left back for Liverpool came. It's
going to go through Hull players.
But the point is, these are the types of players that we are. Sort of, your Archie Grays and that, and from the Championship, Brennan Johnsons and so on. So, but Bowen's one that for me got away on. I was saying at the time, I think we were both saying at the time, we should have signed him. He's a good
top player. I think defensively they're not.
That's the difference between West Ham. They've got a top 6 attack without a striker, and I mean, you saw the Chelsea game, Arsenal last season. You can score a lot of goals against West Ham if you get it right, especially in these big London derbies. They've been known to ship a lot. So, yeah, there'll be a lot of chances, but there's every chance we might concede a few as well.
12:30 coming back from an international break. It's a horrible time, isn't it, to play them?
It is. It is, but I think I said this the other week. I've got a full day out, like a full day out. I've got a mate's 40th in the evening.
That could be bad.
Yeah,
if you've lost,
I'm always a bit unsure about when you have plans
after big games.
Play a big game,
but
I'm coming, love. I'm going to sulk.
Of the day, by 2:30, right? Okay, if the game finished at 2:30, it's West Ham. Like if we lose, I'll be a bit annoyed. But like by 3:34, it's gone, and I'll just be looking forward to the evening. I'll probably be in a pub somewhere in Tottenham watching whatever games it is that's on. And then, make my way down to a 40th party and carry on. It's going to be a great day.
I remember my first night out.
I don't get any anymore, right?
I admire how excited you are to go out.
Buzzing.
As I mentioned before, we've not beaten him yet. So it's a big game for us, but it's also a big game for them. We didn't do this lot. We had the Moose on in December, but the last time we played them at home, we didn't speak to a West Ham fan. We're going to do it this time. Should we do it?
Yeah.
Right, let's speak to our Hammer. Delighted to be joined by Roshane Thomas, West Ham correspondent for The Athletic. Roshane, thanks so much for joining us.
No worries at all. You guys all good?
We're good, thank you. Right, we'll go straight in, talking about the Hammers. Big game coming up at the weekend. A summer of change for West Ham. Moyes was there for a while, did very well. Some fans possibly wanted him gone a little bit before he went. But how's it been since Lopetegui came in?
It's been a slow start for Julian Lopetegui because you have to bear in mind 9 new arrivals this summer. So it's always going to take time for the players to bed into new methods. Obviously, the majority of the players have been used to working on the Moyes for the past 4.5 years. So having a new manager in, plus his backroom staff, which is quite large as well, it's always got to take time. In terms of on the field, honestly, there hasn't been much improvement. Similar playing style to Moyes, if I'm being completely honest. Negative lineups as well, which is annoyed a lot of West Ham fans. But for me, the turning point was the game against Ipswich Town. Everything has clicked that game. Bowen was back to his best. Kudus was back to his best. Paquetá was back to his best. The whole team were back to their best. And I know a lot of fans are like, it's Tottenham after international break, but I think it's the best match to play after international break because if the players are going to show that things are working on the Lopetegui, this is the match to show it. So hopefully the players do well. But overall, I'll say it's been a slow start. But look, there was a reaction to the game against Ipswich Town.
Is that a surprise that the style didn't change? When managers come in, everyone goes on YouTube or reads the articles. Was it expected that Lopetegui would play a different way, or he will? It's just going to take time.
Yeah, I'll say a bit of both because he's never been known for one to play attacking football. That's never been his method previously. And obviously Moyes was very caged as a manager. He wasn't one to always be looking to play expansive football. So they're very similar in that aspect. And what I'll say is the main difference I've noticed, especially in press conferences, Moyes had a bit of character, a bit of personality. You could, make a joke with him every once in a while. I mean, I infamously called him Moisey once in a press conference. So that shows the personality he had. Whereas Lopetegui, he's one of those, he's in and then he's out. There's not much of an engagement so far with him. So there's that. In terms of on the field, it's been, as I mentioned, a similar playing style, 4-2-3-1 mainly, 4-1-4-1 sometimes. And they signed Nicholas Fulker in the summer. He hasn't quite worked out in terms of playing him up front. So he's still got Antonio, still leading the line, still doing the job. He scored, he had a great game against Tottenham a few years ago.
Usually does.
So hopefully he does well against them this weekend. So yeah, it's been a bit similar, but look, as I mentioned earlier, it's always going to take time.
It's a funny one with West Ham because I looked at their summer signings coming in, and it made me sit up, and I was a bit like, "Ooh, West Ham could be a bit tasty this season." And I actually rate Lopetegui as well as a manager. I think he's done pretty well throughout his career. But if you're saying that there isn't so much change in style, what was the point of getting rid of Moyes, who had a settled team, had a settled system? Are West Ham fans, was that driven by West Ham saying we want better football, we want a better style? Is that going to come back to bite you, do you think?
Well, it came back to bite West Ham previously, because the thing about this club is whenever they're like, especially the board, we want to go in a new direction, we want to, play great football. It never works because they get the appointment wrong. So last time Moyes was in charge, they wanted to go in a new direction, and he brought in Pellegrini. Now on paper, Pellegrini was a good. You thought, oh, this could be amazing. He won the Premier League with Man City, but it just didn't work. The style of football was terrible, awful, absolutely awful. And I thought, you know what, Moyes, we love you. You won us the European Cup. You brought stability to the club, but we want to go in a new direction again.
Yeah.
And they brought up Teggy. And look, I hope it works out well for him. But so far, I haven't really seen anything amazing.
Is it a bit of deja vu? How have the board not learnt the lesson from the last time and actually gone and... Obviously, we've got Ange Postecoglou. We wanted to go in a different direction, and that was like a complete 360 from where we are with Mourinho and Conte. That's the sort of thing I feel like West Ham wanted, but you went.
No, very much so. And it's like West Ham, they always make things difficult for themselves. Honestly, as I mentioned earlier, the striker situation. Everyone can see West Ham need a young striker, right? And I know they tried to get John Duran from Aston Villa, but didn't quite work out. But no one was asking for Nicholas Fulkrug, 31. Been injury prone throughout his career. Like, that's not the long-term option for West Ham, but yet they spent 27 million on him, and West Ham fans have already written him off. They've already written him off. So that shows you the frustration that the club has. And look, there's a number of managers the club spoke to. Ruben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon was one. I thought that would have been a great appointment. If not him, then someone young who could, build the club. And look, this is me writing off Lopetegui, and I hope he does turn it around.
Yeah.
But my preference would have been someone young, whether it's a foreign manager, an English manager, even someone like Kieran McKenna from Ipswich Town. Someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a different direction.
And there's got to be a bit of frustration with West Ham at the minute as well, because you're at a point now with the stadium, financially you're probably in as strong a place as you've ever been, really. So you're at that point where you feel like you can push on, and you made all these signings, and you're still playing this sort of negative style of football. Yeah. It's got to be frustrating.
Yeah. Very much so, because like I watch them every week, as you guys will do with Tottenham Hotspur, and it's like, I often come away thinking, what have I learned today from this match? And the answer has really truly been nothing this season so far. And when you got Kudus, Bowen, Paquetá, these exciting players, you want to see
proper
great football. But one thing I'll say about Moyes is, because I'm a West Ham fan, I know I cover the club for the Athletic, but I'm a West Ham fan. And it's like he gave a lot of fans the best memories ever. Like in the Conference League, those journeys in Europe. I mean, you guys will know it from previously following Tottenham in Europe. But like, it's just amazing. Yeah. Like amazing. Memories I'll never forget. And that's what Moyes gave the club. And it's a case of, okay, we've had that, but let's try a challenge for Champions League, for example. Yeah. And that's where the club have fallen short previously. And look, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but I'm not really quite seeing a lot to give me hope that they can do it this season.
Yeah.
You touched on Antonio briefly before. What do you sort of make of that situation? Because, we just discussed before we came on air that we'd be surprised to see Antonio starting these kind of games at sort of 34, 35, especially when he's away on international duty this week. Is he likely to start again? And do you reckon is he sort of their first choice striker at the moment moving forward?
Yeah, I reckon so, because if it's not Antonio, because obviously Fulkrug is out with injury still. If it's not Antonio, it's Bowen who plays up front. And look, I love Bowen. Bowen's a great player, club legend, but he's not as impactful as a lone striker as he is on the right. So let's say it's Bowen up front. You have Serencio Somerville, the new signing from Leeds, who'll be on the left, and then you have Paquetá number 10 and Kudus on the right. But it doesn't quite work out like that. So Bowen's much better on the wing, in my opinion, as opposed to playing up front. So it has been Antonio. And what I've learned of Antonio is you can't rule him out. You honestly can't rule him out. Whenever you're thinking, you know what, it's not going to work out for this guy, like, he needs to go. He comes up and, like Ipswich, scores a goal, has an amazing game. A lot of West Ham fans would be like, I'm not sure if Antonio should start this weekend and he'll score a hat-trick. That's just how he is. He's always proving people wrong.
But it's a game that's made for Bowen on the right and Antonio up front. Spurs will push on, get high, and you'll just be looking for them balls in and the pace of both of them in behind. So it's the ideal game for both of them.
And you know what, right? I know that the 12-foot kickoffs often be like, it's not great, it's not fun to watch, but I think this one will really be good. This one will really be good because I look at it as you got both teams have points to prove, especially as I mentioned, Antonio, Bowen. You got Brennan Johnson who's doing amazing for you guys at the minute. So I look at him, I'm thinking I'm a bit worried about him. So I think it's a game where both teams have a point to prove. I want to come out strong after the international break.
So before we let you go, I want to get your prediction. We always joke about it's West Ham's cup final, but it's a big game, isn't it? But it is. It's a big game. It's a big London derby. Ange is yet to beat West Ham, Arsenal, or Chelsea. So in a way, it's a big game for him. We're on the back of a defeat to Brighton. How do you see the game going?
You know what? I'm gonna go for a draw. But I think it's gonna be a really good game. A really good game. Attacking, obviously, both supporters will be up for it. It's gonna be a great atmosphere. It's always the one, and I'm sure you guys will agree. When it get released, you're thinking, when is it? West Ham, Tottenham, and all the other London rivals. So like, it's a great fixture. I love covering it. So yeah, I'll go for a draw, but a really good game, though. Really good game.
Okay, well, we need 3 points, but all right. Roshane, thank you so much for joining us. As I always say, good luck for the weekend. I don't mean it, but good luck to West Ham at the weekend. And thanks for joining us.
No worries. And I hope Brendan Johnson gets injured before the match.
He might be injured already.
He might be. He got a knock for Wales, so yeah, you might be lucky. Right, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, we've done it. We've had a West Ham fan on. That's a weird stat. They've left London once all season to play Liverpool where they got hammered. Didn't even
so bad.
That just came to me,
isn't it? So they've had
on purpose.
Fulham, Palace, Brentford, and Tottenham.
Yeah, there are more London clubs in this Premier League
season. But Arsenal have never left London, have they? Because every game Arsenal they play at home.
They're always at home.
Although it's funny you say that, because we mentioned that last week. I saw someone post on an Arsenal fan post, or some Arsenal whatever aggregator account post on social media their next 10 games, and 8 are away, and they said, we got a lot of away games in there. And I thought, yeah, because you've had 7 at home in a row, and they've got Newcastle, West Ham, Inter Milan, this one, that one. And
they got Inter in their Champions League.
They got Inter, Newcastle, West Ham, Chelsea in consecutive away games. And I thought, yeah, 2 right. We've been slapping to Brighton and Newcastle, and
Brighton's not a slap, is it?
But all these away games, and they play at home every week. Yeah. Coventry in the cup.
Yeah. They like leaving South London, but they don't like leaving London.
Bolton. They play Coventry or they play Bolton?
They play
Coventry.
Oh, yeah, we play.
Yeah. Sorry, talking about that. Right, enough about West Ham and Arsenal. I want to get your predictions for Saturday. I'm really worried. And I know I get in trouble.
You say that about every game.
No, I don't. I said we'd smash Brentford, and we did.
Oh, Brentford at home.
Well, it's the only one we've smashed anyone. But
3-1's not a smashing.
We did smash them,
though. It is. Go on then.
I can't not go to beat West Ham, so I'm going to go 3-1.
You and Dan Kilpatrick.
I'm going 4-0. Hopefully 6-0, but I'll settle for 4. I'll settle for 4.
You were going to have a little wager before when you said 4-0 off air. Are you going to have a little?
I'm not a better man, I'm not one of these.
I said I'll bet him 100 quid we won't. We could do. I said that before the Arsenal game.
But I
hope we do.
I think they're there for the taking. I think if we don't get the result, it will be off our own doing. I don't think it will be from them beating us. It will be from us making silly mistakes, just not approaching the game in the right way. And I'm not saying that because it's obviously a la mode after Brighton, but it's the way it's been this season. When we haven't got the results, it's because we've made criminal errors.
I can't let this go without picking up your pronunciation of Lopetegui.
Yeah,
Lopetegui.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. It sounds like something you ordered in Italian.
I was thinking at the time, I must have missed when West Ham sacked Lopetegui and appointed Lopetegui.
Julian Lopetegui.
Well, hopefully they don't have Lopetegui on Saturday, because Lopetegui's been rubbish. So Lopetegui could be the man to turn it around.
I saw your face when I was like, I don't know the guy's name. He's a decent manager.
If say the manager.
If we didn't have a well-respected guest on, I would have laughed at you more at that point. I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs. Don't know if I believe it. Maybe I think it'll be 5-1 Spurs. I don't know what I believe anymore. I really don't.
And you are generally right, so it's going to be
we are, aren't
between.
We? So you have a go at me, and I get them right.
2.5-1.
I usually get them right.
2.5-1. Remember when I last predicted a half goal?
Yeah,
it was Luton.
It happened.
The only time I don't get them right is when I get them wrong. But outside of that, I'm usually right.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll be back. What day are we today? Don't
Monday.
even know. We haven't got a game midweek, so we'll be back next Monday. I don't know who's coming on. Jake Robson? Don't know.
I've got half term next Monday. So
I didn't know you were that young.
It might be tricky. No, obviously, but I mean, it might be tricky. We'll see.
If we win,
I'm sure I'll be called upon last minute, although despite not being a first team regular somehow.
All right, Ollie.
Ollie Skip.
Social,
Oh yeah, sorry, we did.
Just bringing it back round.
I forgot.
Trying to help you
out. A lot has happened. Yeah. All right, let's beat those. What do they call? Oh, you said bastards. Those bastards in claret and blue. Is that the song?
Yeah, let's stick with that.
All right, come on then. Up the Spurs. We'll see you next week.